Welcome everybody to the Friday the 13th edition of the Legal Tech Week Journalist Roundtable, where we talk about the top news of the week in legal tech and innovation. I am Bob Ambrogi, and our panelists today are here before you, and let's go around and introduce ourselves. Steve, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Steve Embry from Louisville, Kentucky. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads. And prior to that, I was a practicing lawyer in big law for more years than I like to think.
Molly McDonough.
Molly McDonough. I'm a legal technology and seriously, what am I? I am a media strategist and consultant focused on legal technology companies based in the Chicago area.
And Victoria.
Hey everyone, my name is Victoria Hutchins. I'm a reporter based in Philadelphia, where I write for ALM, mostly for legal tech news, where I cover technology, security, and tech's impact on the legal industry.
And Zach.
Hey everybody, I'm Zach Warren. I'm editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News with ALM. You'll also see me on law.com and other brands. I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Last but not least, Joe.
Joe Patrice from Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast and Above the Law. I've swapped them around that time just to promote more.
Just to mess with our minds.
Just put that a little bit forward. Yeah, no. And I'm excited to be here as always. I am going with an old fashioned today, which is not my usual drink of choice. So we'll see how. I'm classing it up, I guess.
So we've been doing a little bit of an ILTA check-in on the show the last few weeks as we're gearing up for the first hybrid ILTACon coming up in a week. And look, we already have a question. A question from the audience for Steve. Did you get any response from ILTA to your post? So Steve, maybe we should just start with, in case anybody didn't see your post, what was your post and did you get any response?
My post was basically I was trying to report that ILTA didn't invite a bunch of us to their damn conference. And I was sort of trying to reason, go through the various reasons why that might be the case. But really, I came to the conclusion at the end of it that it's just disappointing across the board because by us not being there, or a good number of us not being there, there's less reporting. There's less reporting to vendors about vendors. There's less reporting to people in the industry who aren't there. Less reporting to law firms, to in-house legal departments, and it's a real shame. What kind of response I've gotten? Actually, I have gotten a response. I'm happy to report that after my scholarly report, ILTA has decided to still not invite me.
Yeah, well, you got a lot of response on Twitter anyway. I mean, people were interested in it. I was actually surprised to see some people who were surprised to see there was going to be any media there at all. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I was surprised with a couple of posts about the speakers. Some of the speakers were not even comped. And I've seen that a couple of times where organizations will contact me and ask me to speak at a conference that I wouldn't go to, but to speak. And you go through this nice little spiel. Would you come? Would you come? We can't pay your expenses. Okay, I got that. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay a registration fee. And I'm like, nah. Not going to do that.
Yeah,
I might put the bill for expenses, but the registration to go to, a hotel association conference that I would never ever go to otherwise. That.
Yeah, I had always thought ILTA never comped speakers, but maybe they do make exceptions, or that tweet certainly suggested they make exceptions. I mean, I've spoken at ILTA back in the days before they used to give press passes at all. I guess I don't know why I wouldn't have gotten a press pass, but by virtue of speaking at ILTA, it did not entitle me to get a comp speaker admission. I remember being told at the time that was their policy, and I thought I'd heard that subsequently, but I may be wrong about that.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, if I were Not that I will ever be asked to speak at ILTA now, but if I were asked to speak at ILTA and I was going to go anyway, okay, yeah, it's probably fair I pay registration fees. But if it's a conference that I wouldn't go to, but for the fact they asked me to speak, that's different in my mind. So
Yeah. So for anybody attending in the audience here today who may not know about our media room, Joe, do you want to give an update on what we're doing there?
Yeah,
Your
so we
media
are,
room that's going to
yeah,
let us sit in.
yes. So Above the Law has sprung for a media room, and we are going to be in the Moria suite, which looks lovely. We're going to check in on Monday. So I assume probably starting around 2 or 3, we'll be able to get in there, and we'll be there through checking out on Thursday. And we have a website available for you to sign up for little chat sessions with us if you'd like. And you can just hit me up at joepatrice@abovethelaw.com if you want access to that and need to schedule something. But yeah, and I'll be there, the whole time, because where else am I going to go? I can't go to the conference. But yeah, and you can come in and set up some times and chat with us about that. And some people who do have access to the conference, they're going to hang out with me too from time to time when they don't have anything else going on. And you can have one meeting, very meet the press style, in a lovely high-end Vegas suite. We can live like we're high rollers for a little bit.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. The Meet the Press style is particularly what I'm excited about, because it's a new way to talk to people. I feel like a lot of times at these conferences, it's a lot of us on this call and off this call who kind of have very similar conversations with the same people kind of in a line. I know I've been in meetings where literally I'm walking out of them and one of you is walking into them about to say the exact same thing. So I think particularly because maybe there's going to be not as many people at this one, I think it's a good conference to just kind of float a trial balloon and see if something like this works, and just kind of get a few of these meetings under our belt, kind of work the kinks out. I'm excited for it, see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it would be good for the people who have to sit and give these pitches 10 times a day to a bevy of different media people. I don't know if it saves us any time really or anything, except that I can then just copy Zach and Joe's story and not have to write my own.
Well, I also think there's some value to having been on this show with all of you for a while. There's some value to, we all come at it from a slightly different perspective. And sometimes when we ask questions, it jogs something in my mind I wasn't thinking of. So I think we can actually do a better, deeper dive if we're all kind of in the same place, maybe.
Yep. So maybe one of the big questions is whether there will be anybody there for us to talk to. We're starting to hear reports of some pulling out. I just posted on my blogs. I just got confirmation about 20 minutes ago that iManage is not going to send any of its staff physically to the conference, which they had been planning to do. And they say they're still going to fully support the conference and participate in a sponsor and participate virtually, but they will not be sending anybody physically to Las Vegas. I know of at least one major law firm that pulled out something like 14 people that they were sending to the conference. They have confirmed it with me, but they asked me not to use their name, and I'm going to respect that. But so I don't know. Is this, is this sort of the domino that is going to start tipping over the next week? I'm hearing a lot of concerns from people. I'm getting a lot of, people messaging me on Twitter and elsewhere, who's going, who's not going, are you going? I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next week.
Yeah, I definitely think, and it makes sense. It makes sense with ILTA and their conference that some people are a little bit hesitant now because of like the variances and infections rates going up. And we see that in like law firms, and they're kind of even pushing back some of the return to office plans because the variances, and they're just kind of like, okay, we just continue to work remotely. I think because it wasn't like we just worked remotely for a month. It's been over a year and a half. And they kind of, if they've been doing it this long, the law firms, they probably figure we can at least extend this for another month. So I think it's kind of like people's concerns And, kind of seeing with ILTA, because we're not fully out of COVID, these things happen and you have to kind of like deal with it. You don't really know. It's not like, oh, it's bad weather. It's just kind of like something that's infectious and that can be deadly. And just you have to deal with that. And some people not feeling comfortable with it.
Yep. All right. So in other news, some pretty big news this week on the legal tech industry front that some people who've come to this roundtable before know that we kind of circulate notes among each other in advance of things we want to talk about. And I think we almost all wanted to talk about this one, but Zach got first dibs. So Zach,
I'm quick on
why
the
don't you
draw
kick
on
it
the
off?
spreadsheet. Yeah. So yeah, Latera and Kira Systems. This is something very big news, obviously, very big M&A, two companies that we've talked about a lot on this program. Latera, as we've seen particularly over the past 2 years, has had a lot of M&A activity. I think they put in their press release 12 acquisitions in the past 2 years. My dog agrees and thinks that it is very, very interesting. Hold on one second. That's what you get for a live show. So sorry about that. But yeah, so Kira Systems, obviously very well known in the legal tech AI space. Latera said, basically, we're just going to be putting Kira's technology everywhere that we can, starting in the transactional and contract space, but kind of expanding out from there. Latera, through all these M&A transactions, and especially with this one, really wants to be the big fish. They want to expand as aggressively as possible, it seems. They've expanded out from transactions, from contracts, from documents into many other areas of legal tech, and I don't see any reason why that would slow down anytime soon. So it's interesting to see how aggressively they've been going for this and how quickly they want to grow. I'll stop there and we can talk about the Kira side of things in a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I know you had some thoughts on it too. You want to?
I mean, yeah, it caught me kind of by surprise. I hadn't really thought about this matchup. I just got a message, late night message from folks from both companies saying they wanted to chat. And I was like, I wonder why. And we got down and I popped them up like this, and I was treated to, wow, we're really going to do this. It does make some sense. The more I talk to, especially on the Kira side, about the idea, and this is kind of leading into the talking more about the Kira side, but they have really been doing two different businesses under one roof recently, doing both the law firm stuff and kind of using their technology to do more corporate side and client side stuff. And the argument is, with this, you can take the law firm business, hand it to Latera, who can integrate it into what they do. And the spinoff company that will continue can focus on the new use of the AI tech for this new purpose. And that makes a lot of sense. It does seem like it fits very well within Latera's universe. So that it seems like a good home for that part of the business.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. We all got the late night calls. I think mine came later than anybody else's, because apparently somehow Latera, even though I'm on their Latera TV show and other things, were using the wrong email address for me. So somebody who actually works at Latera caught the fact that they were using the wrong email address. But it's the Latera side of it is really interesting because of the number and aggressiveness of acquisitions they've been making over the last couple of years. Noah Weisberg of Kira said to me, and he probably said the same thing to all of you, that he said, coming into this year, he was not looking to be acquired. This wasn't something that he was thinking was going to happen this year. This was their 10th anniversary year in business. They were really the first, AI contract analysis platform out there. They had this book come out, that they did, that Noah Alex's co-founder did on AI and law. It was really a very good book. They, he says it wasn't on their radar, and so you have to assume that Latera made them an offer they couldn't refuse. And like I said, Joe, they've been kind of, actually the part that most sort of surprised me about this was the spinoff part of it. And I think you all alluded to it. We haven't actually talked about it explicitly, but they are, before they close the deal at sometime at the end of this month, they are spinning off part of Kira into a brand new company called Zuva. And this new company is going to be focusing on building up technology they had already started to develop, as you said, Joe, relating to more of the corporate legal department side that they'd already started to develop. And about a third of their employees will go to this new company and the rest will go to Kira. So essentially, Latera is getting kind of Kira as we know it and think of it, and the core product there. And then Noah's heading off rather than to go relax on a yacht or something, is to pursue a new company. So that was really interesting. And I thought it was interesting in talking to them because, again, I don't know, you guys, we probably all had the same conversations, but when I talked to Noah, I talked to Noah and he kept saying, I really want to downplay that because this is all about Latera, and I don't want to make a big deal out of the fact that we're spinning off this other company, but you just can't avoid it. I mean, it just doesn't happen every day in an acquisition like this. And that was a big part of the story here. So
I found the nature of the spinoff really interesting too, because Victoria did the story for us. And when Noah was talking to Victoria, he said, it's particularly in the contract space, there's so much focus on CLM, contract lifecycle management recently. He doesn't specifically want to do a CLM company because there's so many people that have gotten funding and really grown in that area. He's looking more in the analytics side of things that honestly their technology does seem more suited to in the first place, and also there isn't as much competition there. So seeing that as a growing segment and something we're going to continue, or the industry will continue to focus on moving forward, I think is kind of interesting, and wouldn't be surprised to see them have a lot of success there.
Yeah. One other aspect of this that interests me is what is sort of deciphering or understanding Latera's game plan or longer term game plan. Because some of the acquisitions have taken them off into directions they hadn't appeared to be heading in the first place. I mean, you could argue that with when they acquired Haley Altman's company and Doxley and created Latera Transact, that was kind of heading off in a new direction. I mean, it makes it, in retrospect, it makes a ton of sense, and it seems to have been quite a successful acquisition for them. And they talk about Kira as kind of fitting into that M&A due diligence workflow, which also makes a lot of sense. But when I asked Avanish, the CEO, kind of about that, I mean, his answer was kind of like, if our clients tell us they have a problem, we're going to go out and try and find a way to solve that problem, whether it's by acquisition or building it. And that really opens the door to them going off in, almost any direction in that, given the, within the boundaries of the market they serve. But I thought that was a really interesting response on their part. And, they're really establishing themselves. They were kind of a document automation company, and they really have expanded way beyond that into a real legal tech, platform, I guess you'd call it. I don't know. Anything else on that?
I mean, I guess the only other thing is, with the spinoff, I mean, I have every confidence that this is all going to work. But, you brought up the Doxley situation. They took over Doxley and, they got Haley. this is a situation where they're going to take over this company, and they aren't going to have Noah and Alex. I guess Noah's technically going to be available as a advisor, but he's going to be off doing his own new company. So yes, they're getting this asset, but as opposed to some other transactions, they aren't getting kind of the human capital that was behind a lot of the success, which who knows whether or not that's really all that necessary. I mean, it seems like a well-oiled machine at this point, so maybe it isn't, but it's an interesting difference between this and another transaction that you mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah, and also, in a lot of cases, when those acquisitions happen and they announce that, founder or CEO is going to stay on as an advisor or even stay on as an employee for 2 years or whatever, they're really just coasting. They're not really doing a whole lot in some of those cases. So who knows whether this will really be different. I mean, Noah said he'd be, what did he say, 10 to 20% of his time, I think, devoted to Latera. So we'll see how that goes. All right, we'll beat that one into the ground. Let's see what else we can talk about here. Molly, what do you got this week?
So I found an interesting column by Alison Frankel at Reuters about a study out of Johns Hopkins and let's see, what is it? University of Georgia? Yeah, School of Law. Did a piece on justice in multi-district litigation, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but I do think it's an interesting study with some good, interesting and instructive results, and really shows how multi-district litigation is broken on many levels. They surveyed they were all women in these cases for a bunch of breast implants and pelvic mesh cases. But I think they had still over 217 plaintiffs that they interviewed, and more than 2/3 were extremely dissatisfied with their legal representation, and 75% said they pretty much had no idea what was going on. And I'm reading through this, and it's interesting, and potentially self-selecting with how they set up the study. But most of the issues could be resolved by simple communication processes. I think one of the recommendations by the authors of the study was to, create a good website, which there are a lot of solicitation websites for MDL litigation, but I guess there's not a lot in terms of updating the actual plaintiffs on what's happening in their cases. I guess an incredibly high number of the women involved didn't even know who their actual lawyer was in the case, couldn't refer to which law firm represented them in the multi-district litigation. I mean, this is all just massive failures of communication and a disconnect and dissatisfaction with the justice system and with what they felt like should be happening in the case, including some type of punitive action with the companies. So anyway, I thought it was really interesting, and I'm probably going to dig into it a little bit more.
This is interesting. Do you know, I haven't had a chance to read the story. Was there comparative data regarding the experiences of women plaintiffs versus the experiences of male plaintiffs, or was
no?
I think
this is the only one that's been done like this. That's what I was reading, and it was self-selecting for women because they went ahead and just focused on this grouping of cases, and they all are women in this class of cases that they focused on, but they are looking at doing more study in this area.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think that male plaintiffs in MDL cases would have a lot of the same issues, maybe or maybe not to the same extent, but some of the problems around the law firm's failure to communicate and all that are, basically gender neutral problems in some ways, I think. But I don't know.
One of the things Alison compared it to Costco warehouse type of litigation. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, well, actually Costco communicates with me really well about what's happening with Costco and with the company and with products. And I get emails, I get a magazine, I have flyers. I have a feeling that Costco does a better job.
There's a Costco magazine? I did not know that. All right. We've got a bunch of stories out of Reuters this week. What's Reuters doing right?
I was actually going to bring that up because I found that interesting too, particularly after last year we talked about Reuters growing their legal segment of journalism and hiring a bunch of people, including from ALM. That definitely caught my eye too. Would not be surprised to see that moving forward.
Yeah. Yep. And what other stories did we have from Reuters? What was the other one?
I put one up.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk about that?
Mine was more was less about the Reuters story than than it as a jumping off point. What in the story that I selected, I just saw that Reuters had an article by the Thomson Institute that was just about what legal tech should be on your radar, and they talked to Michael Gerlach about just what legal tech should be on your radar, just generally. And I wasn't actually not that there was anything wrong with this article. I wasn't really drawn to this article because of the answers, but the question. I thought it was an interesting food for thought, maybe jumping off point for people like us to talk about what legal tech should be on people's radar. We've been through a few hype cycles as a group over the years. I think that we've seen new things crop up. Like what is kind of the future here? And that's what I thought would be a discussion point if anybody wants to. I will say I can list the things that were mentioned in this article, see if any of them tickle your fancy. Project or matters management tools, corporate performance management tools, client relationship management tools, which classic, and data feeds were the categories that he mentioned. But yeah, this is more of an open question I was tossing to the group.
Yeah,
I was thinking,
go ahead.
Oh, I was kind of thinking like cloud-based, and I was maybe like practice management, so law firms can wean themselves off of like paper-based types of documents, and really making it accessible for like the appropriate attorneys and staffers to be able to work, from different parts outside of the office and inside the office to not lose that business continuity. Even if they're maybe thinking like, oh, we'll still have people come into the office. I think kind of like having that accessibility safely, having a safe connection to it, like that's something that all law firms should be focusing on.
One of the things that jumped out at me about that article was actually not so much the discussion of the technology tools, but the section that talked about ALSPs and why sort of talked about the idea that more and more law firms are starting to use ALSPs in various ways. And his explanation for this is that law firms just haven't been able to invest the time into the resources or the knowledge or the skills to develop the kinds of technologies that ALSPs have been able to invest in developing. And I read that, and it's a pretty obvious question, but why haven't they? Why haven't law firms not just invested in technology, products or tools, but why haven't they invested more over the years? They've basically opened the door for ALSPs to step in and take away a lot of their business. There's no reason law firms couldn't have done this. Is certainly some of the larger law firms anyway. I understand there's some matters of scale that where ALSPs are going to be better situated to take on major matters. But I just read that and it just jumped out at me as like an indictment of law firms essentially for their failure to be foresightful about this.
Yeah, the point. Go ahead, Joe.
No, you go.
I was sniped a little by exactly what Jasmine said in the chat, which is exactly the point that I was going to bring up too, is I'm not sure that law firms really care that much about losing that type of work to ALSPs. It tends to be the repetitive, what they view as low value work. And yeah, maybe they're losing a little bit of revenue, but the time saving of not having to do that work and instead the stuff that they can bill even higher for, I think it's maybe not the best bet because ALSPs are continuing to gain power and moving higher and higher up that value scale, but that's at least how law firms are looking at it right now, at least from my conversations.
You know, and
I think
that's a
a lot-
good jump. Oh, I was just going to jump quickly on that which is yes, and to some extent, that's good for everybody in the law firm ecosphere. And that goes back to a conversation I had, and I wrote an article about a few weeks ago with Ed Sohn from Factor about maybe there's a point to which the ALSP is valuable for retention of young associates, you know, get them out of doing the drudgery work and have somebody else do that and start the process of training your young associates to do the higher level work earlier.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I think a lot of it may depend on the section of the market that you're looking at, because certainly the very large law firms, I think Zach's points is probably, Joe's is probably spot on. But as you move down the law firm size and characteristics and client mix, some of those firms in the middle don't want to lose that work because they need that work to make their budget and to keep everybody busy, because you know, a lot of those firms have overhired over the years during the boom years and don't really have enough work for everybody to do. So you know, the legal market is so different depending on size of the firm, type of firm, economic models, and all of that. That you know, sometimes and I'm guilty of it too. You tend to focus on the very large law firms and forget about all these other firms. And it always strikes me too is we pay a lot of attention to the firms that use the billable hour model, and yet there's all these law firms out there that use contingency fee models, right? And if they get a lot less attention, I think sometimes, because it's a completely different business. I mean, it's not even apples and oranges. It's apples and I don't know, whatever you want to use.
Persimmons, I don't know. I throw that out because I was watching Looney Tunes earlier and I've heard the word persimmons, and it's one of those that you don't hear all that often anymore.
Okay, so first, before I jump in, how often do you watch Looney Tunes?
So so not as much as I would like, but I did discover recently that apparently HBO Max has the entirety of the Looney Tunes catalog from like the 30s on. And I did not know this. And I was digging around and I was like, wait a minute. And I started hitting the button, and then they just kind of like keep rolling. And I can watch, as I've learned, Wile E. Coyote's tech doesn't work. So if you're out there as a legal tech buyer, Acme, you should stay away from.
Their dynamite sucks.
The only thing I was going to jump in on with Joe's thing is that almost all of those, the three of those 4 points of areas don't have to be specific to legal specific technologies. These are technologies that any business can be using and be applied to legal in some way. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that shakes out, whether law firms kind of wake up a little bit and understand that some of their needs aren't so special or different from other sectors in professional services.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on Joe's sort of core question of whether this article does a good job of setting out some of the core technologies that law firms should be thinking of? I thought it was a good sort of general statement. It didn't go into a lot of depth on it or anything, and you could write a lot more on it. But it was a good starting point for the conversation, I thought. All right. Victoria, you want to talk about your other story? We already talked about one of your stories.
And this article is kind of like what ILTA is going through, with some people are being a little hesitant now to go off to Vegas and meet with a bunch of strangers that they don't know. Some vaccinations, I looked into legal tech companies and legal service providers. They're starting to ask, they're asking their employees about vaccination status. And there's a few of them are mandating if you want to return back into the office, you need to be vaccinated. And they said, you know, it can be a very touchy conversation that could be a little bit polarizing because you may get into political, physical health exemptions, you know, religious discussions. And for one legal tech company I spoke to, at least, they said they didn't want to get into that types of discussion. So they didn't issue a requirement either way, like if you needed to be vaccinated or not to go in the office. Other legal tech and service providers said, yes, for the safety of the people that are in the office, you need to be vaccinated if you want to work in the office. But it still says you definitely have the option of remotely working. So I thought that was interesting. And definitely we've seen like the news over the last few months of law firms, you know, I forget, was it Perkins Coie? I can't remember, but it was a big law firm that said, if you're not vaccinated, your key card won't work to get into the office. So of course, legal tech companies, like any other employer, they're having these discussions as well. Some of them, it just might be a little bit too much of a sensitive topic that they're not discussing. But an article that I just wrote today, you know, some legal service providers, like the ones that are like document reviewers, or they provide like contract attorneys or paralegals, their clients are saying, if you're bringing your people into our offices, they need to be vaccinated. So if some legal tech or service providers are maybe not comfortable having those conversations, their clients are forcing that conversation. And it definitely, not surprisingly, law firms that issue vaccination requirements of their lawyers and employers, they also want their on-demand attorneys and vendor workers to also be vaccinated. But kind of like ILTA, that they're pushing back some of their on-premises, like when they requested like, oh, we want people to start coming back in the office in September, they're pushing that back because of Delta.
I mean, I understand. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just going to say, as I recall, isn't ILTA requiring all attendees to have proof of vaccination before they allow that? I think I remember that.
They are, yep.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, and
but
if you
that's-
have it, they may not let you in anyway. So
Yeah.
but this is within Mandalay Bay, which you know, could
Yeah,
be
right.
swarming with anti-vaxxers all over the place. So the fact that ILTA is requiring that is good for some purposes, but you know, I mean, from a medical
Not
point
enough,
of view, from everything we've been reading about this, even if you're vaccinated, you can carry the virus. And if you're walking through the lobby of Mandalay Bay and then into a private ILTA event, who knows? You still may be carrying it. But you know, with regard to the legal tech vendors, I mean, I understand employers wanting to be sensitive to their employees' concerns about a topic. But I feel like with regard to this topic, we're way past the point where that sensitivity would mean don't talk to them about it, or let's not bring it up with them. I mean, you know, we've all had enough of this. I mean, we really got to be talking very openly and I think aggressively about this topic. And certainly, you know, I think I don't think there's any question from every article I've read of interview with employment lawyers that employers certainly have the right to even require vaccination if they want to do that, and certainly to be talking about it. And so, you know, I can understand. I guess I can understand legal tech vendors wanting to be sensitive and thoughtful and conscientious about it, but they still ought to be talking about it, I think.
if you can't have a serious conversation about this with your employees, then you probably shouldn't be in business. Like, come on now. Like, this is like put on, it's time to put on the adult pants. It's like at a certain point, you have to say, listen, it is not a protected class to deny science. So if you don't want to do that, then you don't have to be here. But like, you've got to kind of, this is a moment to lead. And to Victoria's point about the law firms, we had law firms talking about, we really wish people would get vaccinated. You know, we encourage it. We'll help you set up. We had that for months, and it got most law firms to 80, 90% vaccinated. But there were still 10 to 20 that weren't, which is why we can't have nice things. And that's why Davis Polk and all those firms have started being like, we're turning off your key cards, because at a certain point, you have to be the adult and scold people. And that's just where it is. And law firms have now finally crossed that threshold in the last month, basically, the threshold of we're serious, we're going to crack down. And other companies need to too. Like, this is just, it's time to show some leadership here. All right, I'm done.
There was a, sorry, no, just today this is off the legal topic a little bit, but was reading an article in the Atlantic magazine. I don't have the name of the fellow that wrote it, but it's now becoming an issue with medical personnel in hospitals who are showing the strain from all of this, and are now getting angry that they have to put themselves out there, risk their lives, risk their family lives, work like dogs night and day, watching people die for a group that will not get vaccinated. And a lot of the physicians and administrators that were quoted in the article were raising sort of ethical questions about, not being able to treat people with other conditions because all the beds are now taken up by COVID-19 people who did not get vaccinated. And, I was thinking to myself as I was reading this, my wife has had 3 knee replacements. And I understand the pain that those people go through when they need to have that operation, and now can't get it because the beds are full of non-vaccinated COVID people. It's going to be a raging issue, I'm afraid. It's going to be devilish for a while. And so I didn't mean to get on my soapbox, Joe, but
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a good point. Yeah.
And I kind of think that legal tech and legal service providers are really kind of leading, especially the legal service providers, the ones that provide like the document reviewers and contract staffers. I think they're really relying on that, like law firms and corporate legal departments, they're still relying, it's still okay with leveraging like remote workers. But I think once like those law firms and legal departments start saying, hey, we want people to come back in into the office, I think maybe that's when you might see some of the legal service providers, if they haven't, to get more stringent on, okay, we need to know who's vaccinated, because it definitely sounds like the clients are saying we want vaccinated workers, like we want confirmation of that.
Yeah.
I just noticed that Roberta Tepper was kind enough to put a link to that Atlantic article in the chat room, chat box. Sorry.
Yeah.
Good. And going down our list here, Steve, you had something on the peer monitor index. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, a little not quite as interesting and dramatic as what we were just talking about, but Thomson Reuters came out with the second quarter peer monitor index and did some comparisons to the same figures for last year. And this is the large law firm market, looking at demand, productivity, rate increases, and expenses, and announced that it looks a lot better, that all of these indices are up, except the expenses, which are down, which is a good thing. And so it all sounds really, really good. But then they make the very good point that, it's a little misleading to compare second quarter 21 with second quarter 20. A better comparison is to look at second quarter 19 with second quarter 21. And when you do that, it's not as robust. I mean, there are some increases, there are some things going the right direction, but it's no place near a demand increase. 20 over 21 is 7.3%. When you drop down to 21 over 19, it's 0.6%. So, it's a little misleading to say, let's just look at comparing those years backwards. The other thing I thought was interesting about this is they looked at various segments of the market, such as corporate, M&A, real estate, and litigation. And all of those 21 over 20 were up. Litigation was probably up the least. When you compared it with 21 over 19, some of them were actually down, including litigation was actually down, which, it shows that litigation has not really recovered from where it was in 2019 and is now facing probably a more protracted, if not decline, certainly not an increase, because we thought we were going to be back in the courtrooms. We thought we were going to be having trials, and now the light at the end of the tunnel was another ongoing train. So, for litigation, it could be an extended period of harder economic times. So I thought the whole analysis was pretty interesting. I mean, it looks like the legal market, by and large, is getting back to where it was in 2019, except for a few spots like litigation.
And I'll just jump in and say, from a recruiter, since I have this hat as a consultant for a recruiting company too, like that comports with what I've seen too. If you're a corporate attorney, you can just like announce your intention that you're on the market, and you can get a high-paying job anywhere, and they will throw in bonuses and like stuff like that. And you try to do that in litigation, it's few and far between. Like there are a few mid-sized firms that are trying to seize talent where they can see it, but it's just a harder market. Like it's just not bringing in the revenue that it has historically.
And I wonder, Joe, sitting here thinking about it, whether this is going to exacerbate the already intense pressure in any case for it to settle. Because, for a whole lot of reasons, I mean, it costs and all that. I mean, the number of trials percentage of cases that go to trial has been declining for a number of years. And I wonder if this is going to push that decline even further.
Maybe.
Just can't get to the courtroom. And that's a shame. I mean, as a litigator, I think I wrote a piece on this a long time ago. I mean, some cases just really need to be tried to set some benchmarks about what exposure is in other cases. And if there are no trials, then, it's hard to gauge your benchmarks, particularly as circumstances and culture changes.
Yeah. And we basically have been on a track between companies pushing binding arbitration and the Supreme Court, their war on standing. Like we've been in an environment where litigation's been getting harder and harder to actually do, pushing people towards arbitration, which I guess still involves lawyers, but litigation is under attack as a concept and has been, and now, it's just being exacerbated and pushing more people towards other things. Now, that's not to knock alternative dispute resolution as a whole concept, but as you said, at a certain point, they rely on precedents too, and at a certain point, you need to be having them.
One other point of interest, if you mentioned this, Steve, I'm sorry I didn't hear you mention, but just the fact that part of this profitability for law firms is also being driven by what we've been talking about, which is reduced expenses. I mean, they're cutting way back on office expenses, and whether that will continue as they start to get people back into the office, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that work from home has been a good thing for the bottom line for law firms, and I think a lot of them are realizing that as a longer term strategy.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. Can I just throw with that?
Yeah.
It's been working, but not emotionally for the firms at this point. I think we're at a point where if this continues, and it looks like it's going to into the fall and potentially the new year, that the cutbacks on support are going to have to be reinvested somehow to add support in for the things that firms have been saving money on, because we're getting more and more reports, and ALM has been on the forefront of covering this with fatigue and mental health issues. So I really think that we're going to have to see more investment in support, even for remote and especially for hybrid work environments.
Yeah, and I was going to add, I think it's going to have an interesting impact on office space because, a lot of firms, as of a month or so ago, were saying, we're going to come back. It's going to be great for our culture. You know, I want everybody back in the office. They even had clients demanding that their lawyers work in the office. But the longer that people work remotely by necessity, you know, the closer we get to some time points where a lot of law firms are going to have to make office space decisions based on lease renewal and that sort of thing. And, you know, it's going to be an interesting dilemma for firms then, where they're looking at all this office space thinking, yeah, it would be great if everybody could come back in the office, but boy, when's that going to happen? And can't we reduce our footprint and save a whole ton of money? That's kind of where the rubber is going to finally meet the road on this remote working business, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question to your point, Molly. There's going to be reinvestment just because you can't keep cutting forever, but where exactly that's going to be, I think, is the open question. I pulled up the numbers that the American Lawyer had out of the Peer Monitor report. Office expenditures down 27%, business development expenses down 45%. Increases in tech spending, as well as knowledge management investment for firms. They didn't actually cut there at all. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that continue, where, yeah, I think business development is going to bounce back. To your point, Steve, real estate, I'm not so sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those dollars be reallocated to tech, to data, to knowledge management a little bit moving forward.
Yeah, good points. All right. The only other thing, I didn't really have a story I was going to talk about this week. I did want to talk briefly about a podcast I posted this week, just because I thought it was interesting and further reflection of something we've talked about repeatedly here, which is the increasing investment in legal tech. But I did a interview this week with Zach Posner, who is a co-founder of the Legal Tech Fund, which is the very first venture capital fund that is set up specifically to focus in legal tech. And I thought that was really interesting that they had done that. They actually formed the fund back in, I think it was January 2020, but they didn't actually make their first investment until late in 2020. And they've now made a number of investments, smallish companies. They're really focused on what Posner describes as legal tech companies but companies that are sort of legal in the middle, as he puts them, where they're companies that tend to span other verticals like fintech or consumer tech or something like that. But you know, this guy Posner was somebody who he certainly had exposure. He was a former entrepreneur. He had exposure to the legal world, but he's not a lawyer. He not worked in law in any way, but he just kind of was like looking around out there at what industry had some of the most promising opportunities for investors, and finger fell right on legal tech. So I think it's really interesting that they're doing that, and be interesting to see if others come along and do the same thing.
He just looked around and said, wait a minute, people might think I'm related to Richard Posner. And no.
Right. Yeah. And
see, this is
be
the
a good thing
problem
or a
with
bad thing.
this is a problem with the mute function that we all utilize when we're in this Zoom, is people laugh, but like on the actual final recording, nobody's going to hear that.
You're suggesting we should have a laugh track?
That's what I was going to say. We should totally have a laugh track.
So I have on Thinking Like a Lawyer, the podcast, throwing that plug out there. I have I have a soundboard I made our friends at the Legal Talk Network that show is through. I talk to them like I want to be able to like morning zoo this and like hit buttons and have like weird sound effects. And so I do. So I'm able to like hit the occasional laugh track if I need to.
Yeah, Catherine seems real thrilled with that.
Oh, okay. So I that's actually a good point. I needed to see if people listen. See, she actually doesn't hate them. You know who hated them was Ellie. When my co-host was Ellie Mistal, who is more famous now than he was when he was at Above the Law. But when he was there, he hated every second of my sound effects.
There's
now
a
there's,
great podcast board you can get that lets you do that too. You can if you plug all your mics into it,
Right.
there's a whole bunch of sound buttons on it and stuff you can do during a podcast. But I don't know if it works with
There's-
Zoom. We'll have to check it out.
See, that's why
There's
I got this software-based one that they recommended so that I didn't need to bring the mixer everywhere. Because that's
Yeah.
the thing. I can bring a board with the mixer, but
Right.
yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Does
Yeah.
it work with Zoom?
That's a good question. I'll bet I could make it. Yeah, I could make it. Yeah. I have to do a little bit of setup, but I could actually
Yeah.
make it work. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think
all
we
right.
have a project.
You know,
So
there's-
stay tuned next week.
Yeah.
there's actually a new app out for Apple Watch that you can push these little buttons and it makes all these little like wah wah sounds and laughs.
So key.
You're really the only one who needs a laugh track, Joe. I mean, the rest of us just aren't very funny. So.
Oh, see, wait a minute. Okay. Yeah. When you say you need a laugh track, that's suggesting I'm not funny and that I need
No,
to
no,
artificially.
no.
Yeah. No.
No. In the real world, people
Mm.
are laughing at you, with you,
With me. Yeah.
It's with him.
That's where it goes.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. All right. Anything else? Any rants or raves or complaints or whatever else? I guess we'll do this next week. When's everybody heading out to? Not everybody. Those of you, all two of you on this call besides me, or Steve, you're going too. So all three of us will be there. Four
I'm
of us will be
heading-
there, counting me.
I'm heading out. Actually, I got to check. When are you all heading out? Let me check.
Sunday, going Sunday.
I think I think I might be a Sunday too.
I'm a
Yeah.
Monday, but Reese is going to be there from Sunday for LTN.
That's right. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Right.
All right.
Right.
And is Reese participating in the journalists in the media room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
good.
he was the one who was in first, as far as I heard.
Oh, all right, good. All right, then. Well, we'll be back here next Friday then, I guess, and our final preview leading up to Ilticon, and then some of you will see in Las Vegas.